laws and policies in the region. So my name is Saliha Farouk, and I am a government relations manager with Justice for All Canada. That is a genocide prevention organization as well as human rights and advocacy. Canada's newly released and newly announced Indo-Pacific strategy does acknowledge India as the world's largest democracy, but we argue that a democracy cannot coexist with a government ruled by the Bharatiya Janata Party, or the BJP, which is a right-wing nationalist party founded by an organization inspired by 20th century European fascism, and that is a fact. And as a result of that, over the past 20 years, underneath BJP rule, India has displayed a strong appetite for fascist crimes against humanity that are actively impacting the most vulnerable minorities, particularly Muslims, Christians, Dalits, as well as tribal communities that are not always accounted for in the media. So much so that the NGO Genocide Watch has issued a genocide alert for Muslim minorities in India. And so we're here under that context as well. Under Prime Minister Modi's regime, attacks on religious minorities have spiked enormously under right-wing supporters of his government. They are the perpetrators. And right now we find that the major targets of attacks are Muslims, Christians, and Dalits. Muslims in India, in particular, have been on the receiving end of hate-mongering from Hindu nationalists, as well as extremists, both in everyday society, but as well as in digital spaces. And we believe that such discriminatory actions are sponsored by groups or individuals close to the BJP government, as reports consistently show. The failure of Indian Muslims to remain silent over state-imposed impunity has resulted in the indiscriminate demolition of Muslim-owned homes, as well as businesses across India, after they are, for example, linked to protesting the BJP's treatment of Muslims. So these shocking demolitions, as we see in the news, are a new phenomenon in India, whereby the homes as well as the livelihoods of minorities are under threat. So today in India, BJP officials also openly deliver hate speeches as well as shocking anti-minority rhetoric, all while India's Prime Minister Narendra Modi offers tacit support simply by remaining silent over such overt displays of racist discrimination impacting most minorities in the region. This is not only consistent with the 10 stages of genocide, as we know, but it's also led to the widespread economic boycotts, for example, of minority businesses and shops, as well as pretty horrific mob lynchings of Dalits and Muslims by cow vigilante groups, and of course other acts of discrimination as well. So under orders of the BJP, today thousands, for example, of Indian security forces are also stationed in Kashmir. Kashmir, of course, being the indigenous and occupied region, as well as coincidentally the location of next year's G20 meetings. So Kashmir is also home to thousands of activists and journalists that are arbitrarily detained for spotlighting the BJP's oppression of their fellow Kashmiris. And until today, we know that the Canadian government has not commented on the fact that the G20 meetings is going to be held not only in a contested Indigenous land, but also in a region where thousands of people are arbitrarily detained simply for protesting peacefully, as well as free journalism. In December 2019, the Modi administration introduced a series as well of discriminatory citizenship laws that I alluded to in the beginning of my address here. One of them is called the Citizenship Amendment Act. The other one is called the National Register of Citizens. They both work more or less to disenfranchise as well as to strip millions of Muslims of their Indian-born citizenship. So the truth is, democracy, as we know it, cannot exist in India while institutions in India that are meant to hold the government accountable are actively being degraded, thereby resulting in the widespread persecution and demonization of these minorities that I speak of. These realities have been documented not just by our genocide prevention organization, but by Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, as well as the U.S. Commission on International Religious Freedoms and other human rights think tanks. I just wanted to speak also on behalf of thousands of Indo-Canadians here in the country who do live with trauma and fear for their loved ones back home. And I also represent other Canadians that might not be Indian like me, but that might care about international development as well as global human rights. So together we do call on Prime Minister Justin Trudeau to acknowledge the Indian government's discriminatory anti-minority laws, the rising threat of genocide against Muslims, as well as the persecution of Christians, Dalits, and other minorities such as tribal communities. And last but not least, we have ambitious trade agreements like the Comprehensive Economic Partnership Agreement that with India that really only work to empower and embolden fascist Indian leaders that are seeking to advance this exclusionary atmosphere that's unwelcome minorities. So instead of developing trade deals with the BJP, who are responsible for this mayhem that I described, we really call for Canada to rather move towards sanctioning the Indian government, particularly officials in the Indian government responsible for, as well as complicit in human rights violations against Muslims and other minorities in India. Thank you.